We are in summer 2018. I'm freshly 13 years old, and I remember being in this summer camp. This this girl, there was a girl. She had beautiful green eyes, a matte skin, a kind of Persian, Egyptian build, and I was really attracted. I think honestly, it was maybe the first time I had this kind of traction toward a girl. I was shy. I I didn't dare to just approach her and talk concretely. Actually, I was approaching her. I was in the surrounding, but like a creepy or weirdo, just being around for being around because I didn't know how to do otherwise. I wasn't able to be trying to exchange. I remember taking all the courages I had within me to go to her and ask her, "Hi, what's your favorite color?" Really. And so obviously nothing happened. I just spent the whole vacation looking at her, suffering from earning nothing and just thinking out back and forth in my bed all night about what we could do, what we could be. Anyways, in the very same vacations, there was a guy. He was 2 years younger than me, so he was 11. He was shredded. He was doing some breakdance, and he had this really aesthetic build with like good shoulders, completely like cut, sharp abs, and he was athletic. In this summer camp, we had some sports kind of challenges in order to just entertain ourselves, and he was shining. Beside this, he was a really outgoing person, talking around. He was kind of dumb, but he was just expressing, and this necessarily attracts people around. And I remember how I felt inferior to him. I remember of how I was looking at my appearance so much. I was like, I was like washing my hair and making my haircut with a ton of gel in my hair twice a day, maybe 3 times a day, in order to be sure my haircut would be perfect, because this is one of the few things I had control on. I was thinking about what would others think of my outfits, of my shirts, of whether or not I have short socks or not short socks. This kind of ridiculous stuff. I was thinking back and forth so much of this kind of thing. And I think this is maybe one of the main reasons I wasn't able to really make connection, to really exchange with people. During these vacations, I remember asking to my grandpa to take a picture of me shirtless. I don't really remember of the motivation for this. Maybe it was to send it to my father because I wanted to show my swim short, or I don't know. And when I saw the picture, I was like, whoa, I don't like my body. I don't really like how it looks. I was indirectly making the comparison with this 11 years old boy that was freaking jacked. But there was also just me looking at myself. I had no abs. It was like basically bread. I had the bread belly. And when I thought about this, by instinct, I decided to go out. And I remember how the floor, it was made of these squares of rocks that are so painful when you walk on it, like without shoes. I decided to put my hands on it and do push-ups. It was painful for the ends, and push-ups, I wasn't really sportive or anything. I wasn't really athletic. I decided to go for a 10 sets of 10 push-ups. And in case I wouldn't be able to achieve it, I would go on my knees. So even my knees would go on these freaking hard rocks. And it was so painful, but I've been through. And I succeed. In the end, I was really proud of me. I wasn't thinking about it, but it was the first time I had created a challenge of my own. On my own initiative, my own thoughts decided to drive me to do something that would be hard. And that would be, I think, the first moment that something was created inside. But this is not when I began to do sport regularly. Actually, during the very same summer, I remember being in Normandy at my dad's home because my dad and mother are divorced, and I live during the whole school year with my mother in Paris. Meanwhile, I'll go on vacations in Normandy with my father, which is the two regions are about 2 hours of car. And so I'm at my dad's home, and I remember he was a chief at that time. And sometimes I had to go to the work with him. And on the kitchen, there was on the door stands a pull-up bar. He was trying to get in shape, to have kind of the balanced lifestyle. He was just in his 30s. So I guess, yeah, this is what happens in this kind of moment. But anyways, this is not the subject. He was kind of challenging at me, or maybe not, but I had the challenge of, can I surpass my father? He was able maybe to do some kind of 7 pull-ups, something like so. So I go for the bar, I take it in chin up because it apparently is easier, and I try. I hold, and I cannot go further. About the 90 plus degrees, and I wasn't discouraged. It was kind of a challenge, so each time when going to that work, it was my challenge of the day. And this is how by the end of a week I could get my first pull-up. But this is not when I also begin to do regularly sport. This is just a glimpse of something growing inside. The end of summer was approaching, and so it was time for the return to school. I had mentioned that I wasn't a really outgoing person, but I indeed had friends. Actually, I was stronger into making long-term relation more than, just you get to know someone and you make something with him. I'm more of you. I spent a week looking at you, and then I'm like, hi, one day. And then the second day, I'm like, my name is Leo. And then the third day, I'm like, what do you like in life? And then we have normal conversations. I exaggerate a bit, but just said so that you can understand the image I'm trying to depict. So I had friends, and I remember of that girl that was a friend, nothing more. We were talking about sport, or I don't know, and she was telling me that she had an application on which she had daily challenges of doing abs, and the goal was to make some streaks in order to every day being able to achieve a challenge to succeed to these. And this is how I saw this as a challenge of my own. What if I try to do this also? And this is how I began to do abs. Naturally, on the day-to-day basis, it wasn't the best exercises, the best programmation, but it was something. And I remember also that this wasn't going alone. There was something growing inside and in the background, because on the side, I also decided to kind of begin a diet. It was something like no bread, 1 yogurt a day, no more. Eating an apple instead of the second yogurt I would eat normally, and a kind of special breakfast with some random pistachios, bananas, I don't know. And this is how by the end of a couple of weeks I could see appearing some results. I could see a beginning of abs. Like at the beginning I had 4 abs, not 6, neither 8. It was like the beginning of abs. This is something really funny because ever since I never saw this form of abs I had. But anyways, this is not the subject. We have to focus on the story. I was telling that It was the first time I was seeing my abs. I was getting some result and I was working for it on the two side of thing, on your plate and on the working out side of thing. And you may remember that I told you it was with a girl that I began this challenge. And naturally we began to exchange a bit more. By time passing, I kind of developed some thought, ideas concerning her and me. I began to develop some kind of feelings, and I was feeling more and more confident to declare it to her. I remember of each morning spending 10 minutes waiting for her bus to arrive in order to have a walk with her from the bus station to the high school. It was really little moments, but I was cherishing so much because it was one of the rare occasions we would have to talk together without anyone around. Yeah, it was kind of a safe zone. And there was one day I had decided to declare my feelings, but not in this place. I decided to declare it in the court, the high school court. I was like, hi, let's call her Sylvia. I was like, hi, Sylvia. I want to talk to you. Do you have a minute, please? I had talked about my thought, like my plan to go to tell my feelings to my friends, my boyfriends. I had prepared a speech. I had prepared a text with my feelings, something like, Sylvia, it's been this amount of time, we know each other. I've been spending a really great time. I really like your personality and you make me feel great. And it was way better than what I'm telling. What I'm telling is shit. It was, honestly, when I look back, it was really a great script. I don't know how I was able to be that inspired, but maybe love. It was just feelings. And so we are walking around, we have this kind of ridiculous small talk about nothing. And then I launch my speech. I'm like, hey Sylvia, blah 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 blah. And I deliver it so perfectly. I'm so confident. I'm shitting on myself, but when I hear myself being so clear in what I say, I'm like, she will say yes. I'm pretty convinced about it. She looks at me. I look at her, and she tells me, but Leo, you're like a brother to me. When I hear that, a smile rays on my face. I'm like this. It's raising so high that it can contain my tears. I say something like, yeah, I understand. Okay. She was saying shits like, I don't want to lose you. I'm scared of this because I really appreciate our relationship. I I do not listen, honestly. I go to my friends that with who I talked about this situation, and I told them, and my smile was still raising so high. And I was even laughing really hard, enormously hard. And then when they were gone, I cried alone. I was like, whoa, okay. Quickly after this, I developed a kind of weird feeling. To be honest, I've been taught my whole life to be a kind person, to care about others, because I was the grandbrother of 2 children. And so yeah, I had to care about others, and this is how I've been educated, and this is the first time I had developed a contradictory feeling. I wanted to make her regret. I don't want it to hurt her, but I genuinely wanted her to regret to have rejected me. I was like, I will become so incredibly attractive that she will In French, we say she will bite her fingers out of regret. And the funny part is that we continue to talk because she would be too hurt to not talk to her brother anymore. Ah, but anyways, time passed. It's 6 years later now. Time passed in the story now. And to be honest, I quickly moved on. So much that I kept talking to girls. So I think it's okay. I was just kind of emotional because I haven't talked about it, but yeah, I'm a really sensible person. And during my whole school period, let's say, I was crying for nothing over everything. It's about this year, I think, that I was developing a resistance to it, or a way to not express it. I was creating a lot of humor about anything that could make me cry, because you may not notice it, but I'm half Chinese. And in school, I wasn't bullied for this, but I was mocked. There were like Wong, Ching Chong, that kind of stuff that is ridiculous, but I was just so emotional and fragile that I was making things up in my head on my own. And even when I was 20, I still had this kind of issue. So it's about this year that, with this growing confidence and this wish of also ending this, I began to create some kind of humor about my own bad situations, my own unfortunate experiences. And yeah, really quickly I go to talk to another girl. I wasn't, let's say, a Don Juan, or I wasn't talking to every girl. When I was talking to a girl, I was focused on her. And I think this is something that since the beginning I was doing in a really great way. I was investing genuine time and focus on a girl. I was genuinely trying to talk to her, not trying to chit chat, or I don't know. My goal when talking to a girl was getting to know her and understand her. I wasn't thinking this way when I was 13, but in the end, this is the kind of result I had. And I remember that a lot of relationships I had with girls, whether I had ideas of maybe being a couple with her or not, were mainly relation in which girls would talk to me. She would talk about serious stuff, their situation in families, some hardship they may have. This is something I would recommend young guys to do, because what I was seeing on the other side was really outgoing person, kind of Don Juan. I already mentioned it, but Don Juan is a guy who is in love with every girl he met. And so at the beginning it's kind of great. You have 5 girls that are in love with you, but in the end you understand how pointless it is to have some kind of deep connections with really few people, because you create a kind of superficiality of the relationship. You place the relationship as something that is not really important. This is something you normalize. And in my opinion, getting to this flirt stage with girls in which you're supposed to get to know her and all this stuff, having this relation with so many girls at the same time, in my opinion, is kind of pointless. But anyways, this is not the subject. The end of the year is approaching, not the scholar year, the year 2018. And Christmas is approaching. And I had this idea. Mom, can I get a pull-up bar? I actually saw some videos on the internet. I remember of this video from a YouTuber I really liked at the time. He was doing a lot of featuring with people all around, like any sphere and domain. And one day he posted a video with the French champion that was international champion of street workouts. And I remember seeing the video, I was kind of skeptical. When seeing the videos of the competition, I was like, whoa, that's freaking impressive. But On the other side, the French world international champion was doing some kind of front lever in the subway, dragon flag, all this stuff, and I was like, that's kind of cringy. But I think this is how the door opened to me. The sport exists, and yeah, there are competitions, and this is a possibility of what it is. This is how naturally I think I had in my feed and recommendations new videos of street workout. I saw videos of the Swab, a guy named La Rosa, Viktor Kamenov, Melnik, Daniel Lezens. And also on the French YouTube, I discovered a guy named Shubatok, Eric Flag. Shubatok was my favorite. He wasn't the strongest at all, but he was freaking aesthetic. Really built in V, uh, completely cutted abs, great shoulders, chest, and his charisma when he was talking. He was so charismatic and entertaining. And more than this, he was self-humbling himself. His name was Shuba Talk. Talk because he was talk to the top plunge. This kind of stuff. And so then, after watching all these videos and getting so inspired, it was obvious. I then thought, I want to be the next French world champion. And so my plan was clear. I had decided to follow Sengoan's advices. Sengoan is the French calisthenics world champion of 2018. It was something like you go through certain reps for a whole year, and then you will be able to do skills and freestyle. This is, in my opinion, the best way to progress, extra. And so this is what I decided to go for. I coupled this way of seeing with some little method in programmation that was provided by Shubatok and Eric Flag. It was something like you write your trainings with the amount of sets. You have concrete goal to every time you train to add a bit of just a repetition here and there, but you have to keep the same exercises, the same amount of sets, the same amount of rests. It was basically a way to measure the overload that you could apply throughout the time on the very same kind of training. And so it's about this moment that something was happening, growing immensely, way more than this couple months before. Or actually, it was maybe the end of this. It was the reignition of everything I was growing inside. I had this flame of changing that I had in summer with this boy and this girl. I had this kind of challenges that was creating something within me with these pull-ups. I had tasted what was the success from just getting to the end of a challenge, a physical challenge. I was getting more and more abs. And this was my measurement, abs. I was getting close to my six-pack, or maybe I had my six-pack already. And this is when I naturally decided to launch concretely to engage myself in this journey. In order to point out how important that was for me, I have to talk a bit about me. As mentioned, my father and mother are divorced since I'm basically 3 years old or so, something like so. And quickly my dad left to Normandy, so really far. And so I could see him pretty like rarely. Maybe not every holiday, but sometimes one holiday out of two. And I had a brother and a sister from him and my stepmother, but there was distance. And yeah, I was basically a lonely child. And in this moment, when I'm 13 years old in 2018, she had got an husband 4 years ago, something like so, and she made a kid with him. But I was still feeling lonely to some extent. What was taking most space in my life was this world. My world with my mom, my little brother that was 2 years old or something like this. Meanwhile, I was 13, so there is not concrete relationship, or at least it's not as usual relationship in which you can play with your brother. And my second world was cool. This is why I was really invested in my relationships with people and mostly girls when I was chatting with them. And to this moment, I had created something on my own. This dream of being the world champion of street workout. This was my dream. I had built it from here. And yeah, I think this is a moment something really shifted. Something really happened. A moment in which I was making more space for me. A world that was mine. And it was gaining more and more importance in my head. Because this is what happens when you just have two worlds that are basically your mother, your brother, and your stepfather, and your friends. If something goes wrong in one of these, you want to refugiate in one or another. Or if everything is wrong, you just want to cry and you're desperate. But this time I had something to rely on, and I had something I could refugiate myself into. I didn't had to go for my friends or this side of thing if something was wrong with my mother. I could deal with it on my own. I wasn't creating dependency on others. I think this is a pivotal point. This is, if there is something I want you to understand, is that I really created something here that would follow me along for the rest of my life. And so the new year comes with a new goal and a new dream, new world also. And I remember of one day I was from the gymnasium going to school, and I was talking to this boy. We were in the same class, and naturally we were talking about, I don't know, maybe sports. He was talking like, yeah, I began to do push-ups, squats, abs a year ago, like Saitama. He was doing a kind of 100, 100, 100, or 200, 200, 200, that kind of stuff, inspired from the manga One Punch Man, if you may not know it. And I was like, yeah, I began to do abs a couple months ago. I can see some result. I'm pretty happy. And also I asked for Christmas for a pull-up bar. And so I'm eager to train on it every day. It's incredible. And he was like, oh yeah, me too. I also got my first pull-up bar. And he was like, do you know like Frank Medrano or Andrea La Rosa? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, do you know street workout? I was like, yeah. And so this is how we realized that we had about the same project. He wasn't as ambitious as me necessarily, but he had this idea of, I want to do street workout. This is so inspiring, so incredible. So this is how I met a guy which new world was about the same as mine. And this is how we blended it together. The time passed and we naturally began to talk more and more, and we developed this relation of rivalry to some extent because we had about the same level. He had a bit of advance on abs and overall physical condition, and more on the push side. But me, on my side, I seemed to be kind of great at pull-ups, and we had about the same trainings. We were challenging each other. We were sending about each set we were doing every day, being like, look at my 7 pull-ups, and then me just after I would try to do 7.5 and or 8. And this is when I discovered maybe the sanest rivalry I had in my life. I have to be honest, I developed a lot of moments, some feelings of jealousy or ego, but in the end it was just erased by the feeling of just moving forward on my own. And so you may remember of what I said that the world champion advises us to do a 1 year of set and reps and then go for skills and freestyle. But me, I would hardly explain why, but I thought I wanted to kind of shortcut this. I decided to go for kind of front lever variations since almost day one. Since I had my pull-up bar, I decided to go for what I was calling a reverse chair front lever. I was basically sticking my knees to my shoulders, and so it would enable me to have something easier than a tuck front lever. And then after this, I would go on tuck front lever. It would also, by the way, enable me to do pull-ups with an interesting range. It was freaking ridiculous, but when I look back, it was kind of smart. So I have no regrets. And so this is how naturally I began to progress really gradually on this front lever side of thing. And by the end of a couple months, I was able to hold a tuck advanced front lever by the end of 2 months exactly. And that was pretty great. But I think I need to come back a bit on this subject. Like, I decided I wanted to shortcut. I think even at the day of today, there are moments, and this is something I'm trying to erase, but there are a lot of moments in which I think I can shortcut things. I think I can not listen to an advice because the person is different and she maybe is not as invested as I am. It's completely fueled by ego. But this is how I thought pretty much a fairly long period of time. I can do otherwise and I will get the results. And to some extent, it worked. This is why I continued to do it. But when I look back, in most of the situation, I would just crush myself due to this. So this is how I come to this situation. We are in February, March of the year 2019. And I had stopped to talk to girl, to be honest, during these 2 first months. But it's during the month of March that, I don't know, I remember of looking at a girl in my class. She wasn't the beautifulest. She was really kind and she seemed outgoing. Something that I was really seeing shining. She was making kind of ridiculous situation of her own, but this is something I was finding cute. We'll call it Eliza for the story. I began to talk more and more to this girl. I remember, as I did with Sylvia, I was trying to spend as much time alone with her, and we would in the morning go to a wooden table in the high school court, do our graded homework 5 minutes before giving it to the professor. That kind of stuff. We also could talk a bit during this kind of moment. We exchanged our phone number, and this is how we could talk more and more. And as other girls, she kind of revealed herself. She had lost her father. She had talked about how painful it was. And I developed a kind of really deep empathy for her and even some kind of admiration of how outgoing and smiley she could seem when all of this hardship was beneath. And so time passed and we are in April. I mentioned it, I'm half Chinese, and for Chinese, April is the month of dead people, actually. And so it's a moment for Chinese to return to the country in order to honor it, to do a worship to ancestors, whether it's by cleaning the tombs, I don't know how we call this, like where people are resting in cemeteries, cleaning the places, little rituals, all this stuff, and it's basically it. And this is the occasion for my grandparents, my Chinese grandparents, to come back to China and to bring us with them. And so this moment was approaching. It was in the middle of the high school period. I would miss some evaluations, some exams. I was I was so happy for that because it was some physics, some history, geography. It was so I was feeling this so badly. I wasn't bad at school. I was kind of this mid person that just gets a grade by doing not much. But this time I was really scared for my situation. And I'm telling all this because with these 2 weeks of vacations in the middle of the school period, I was kind of scared of losing the connection I had with Elisa. And so I thought, it's a moment. I have to kind of finalize things. I have to conclude and lock her. Really, I was really thinking like I have to lock the relationship. So this is how I decided to come for this, and I could take my courage. I was confident because I had developed this relationship, and I was feeling that she wasn't uninterested in me compared to Sophie. Whoa, my bad, my bad. Compared to Sylvia, we had the kind of game of, yeah, I have a crush. We were describing it, knowing it was the other one to some extent, but we never really said it was the other one until one day we finally been through. And this is how I succeeded. I had my first girlfriend. I was progressing in street workout, and I was getting more and more results in my back, mostly because of these pull-ups. And this is how I go to China in peace. And this will be the end of the story. I hope that you liked it. Sincerely, I'm just glad also to have been able to share it to you. Do I have things to mention specifically? Yeah, I just wanted to tell you that there's about 3 to 4 more parts of my calisthenics journey that is related to the person I could become through the journey. Don't hesitate to just share your thoughts, maybe your experiences, ask questions, anything. I'm sincerely glad that you listened through the whole thing, and I sincerely hope also that you get something out of this. I hope that you take care of you, and I can just wish you to spend your time mindfully, and see you.